based nutritional information. So with all of this, there's great news. Did you guys know that you can actually prevent, stop, and even reverse some common degenerative diseases? Did you guys know that? Yeah, that's the good news with all of this stuff. And these are really, like you hear waterborne or airborne illnesses, these are actually food-borne illnesses. So it's all about the dietary choices that you make that will determine how these diseases are expressed. So for example, you may have a genetic predisposition to diabetes or coronary artery disease, but the dietary choices that you make will actually affect whether these genes are expressed or not. And here's one example, and this is a great example. We like to look at long-term studies with lots of people. In this particular case, this was a 25-year study. So Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who you'll recall was in the trailer for Forks Over Knives, in 1985, he took 24 patients. Now, here is a guy, he was a breast cancer surgeon. And he, all day long, he's basically manipulating women's breasts. And he realized that he was actually part of the problem, not part of the solution. And he decided he wanted to start doing research on the effects of diet and health outcomes. So this is what he did. He asked for 24 patients. These patients were much sicker than he ever imagined. So between them, they'd had on average 2 cardiovascular events per person. We're talking pretty serious stuff here, 4 heart attacks, 3 strokes. I don't need to read it, but you guys can sort of see these people were getting worse. In fact, 5 of the people were told they wouldn't live throughout the year. So, in fact, one of them was on the Forks Over Knives trailer too. She'd had 2 heart attacks, and they basically just told her that she needed to get in a rocking chair and basically prepare to die. So what happened? Well, their cholesterol lowered from an average of 246 to 150. Their disease progression had either stopped or in many cases had reversed. Their angina was improved or eliminated. Their exercise capacity was increased. Their sexual function was restored. I don't know if you guys remember that in Forks Over Knives, but there's some talk about that. And they had no further cardiovascular events, drugs, or procedures. And they're alive today, 27 years later, and 5 were not expected to live throughout the year. Now, there were 6 people that didn't stay in the study because they thought it was too hard. And this is what happened to them. 4 cases of angina, 4 bypass surgeries, 1 angioplasty, 1 case of congestive heart failure, and 1 death. So there was an average, again, they continued on, 2 events per person versus no events in the 18 people that stayed in the study. Now, in contrast to traditional approaches to treating coronary artery disease, which is either drugs or surgery, and many studies shows that these cholesterol-lowering drugs do not reduce the risk of heart attacks, stroke, or death. It's as simple as that. In fact, angioplasty, there's actually some risk because when you're putting in this balloon, there are these plaques that are all throughout your body for people that have this artery disease. And it's not the plaques that have been there for a long time that are the problem. Those tend to be more stable and calcified. It's these plaques that sort of pop up. They're more premature. Well, when you have an angioplasty, there's a chance that you're going to nick one of these plaques and it's going to rupture. And then you have a blood clot, and there you go. You had a heart attack. The other thing is within a few months, 50% of arteries are blocked again. You guys want to know, do you have any idea why that is?
They haven't lost weight or fat.
They haven't changed the way that they're conducting themselves. They've gone and they've eaten the same diet that they did before, and so they're expecting that this is going to sort of work some miracles, and it doesn't. Here's a study that was done on patients receiving Lipitor or angioplasty, and actually they found out that the patients who didn't receive the surgery had fewer heart attacks, less chest pain, and made fewer visits to the hospital. So they did better on just the medication than they did with the angioplasty, which costs $80,000. As far as bypass surgery, which costs $100,000, it doesn't work most of the time. Like I said, these large stable plaques, it bypasses these, but it's the other plaques that are really the volatile ones. They're left alone, and those are the ones that can certainly rupture. So, and actually when you change your diet and lifestyle, these volatile plaques become stable within a few weeks, and that's what's reducing your risk of heart attack or stroke. There have been 3 major studies here about bypass surgery, and they all show that the outcomes for patients who have surgery versus patients who only take drugs are the same, unless there's a couple examples there where you would want to have surgery. But in most cases, for most people, the outcomes would be the same with the drugs. Now, this isn't just, dietary intervention isn't just useful for people with coronary artery disease, it's for people with all kinds of degenerative diseases, including diabetes. So there was a study from Dr. Neil Barnard, and he put 25 type 1 diabetics, and those are the type that don't produce their own insulin, juvenile diabetics, and then type 2 diabetics. They put them on a whole foods plant-based diet, and this is a diet that's high in fiber and carbohydrates. In just 3 weeks, the type 1 diabetics reduced their insulin requirements by 40%, and their cholesterol dropped by 30%. And that's pretty significant if you're talking a cholesterol of 200, which is pretty average or maybe even low in this country. That's saying it's went down to 140 in just 3 weeks. And then 24 out of 25 type 2 diabetics completely eliminated their medications in just a few weeks. And that 25th patient had a problem with compliance. So Dr. Neil Barnard's research consistently shows that diabetics can reduce or even eliminate medications, significant drops in cholesterol, A1C levels, which is the long-term marker for blood sugar. These consistently go down in just a few weeks. So this is really, really powerful stuff. And these are not the only conditions that respond well to dietary intervention. You might be surprised about a lot of these, including osteoporosis and migraines. I meet people all the time that I think could be really helped by this. Gout, Alzheimer's, all kinds of different diseases. So these other conditions, so drugs and surgery are the typical ways that these conditions are treated, and there's no comparing the results of a plant-based diet intervention with the results that these drugs and surgeries have. They don't treat the underlying problem. People tend to get worse, and so with dietary intervention, not only do people feel better, but they actually get better. There was doctors prescribed Vioxx to people who had arthritis. And this was a drug that people took and they reported feeling better, but unfortunately, I think 50,000 people died from taking this drug. So they felt better, but what was going on wasn't actually making them better. So pretty scary. In fact, Tim Russert, you guys remember him, he used to be the host of Meet the Press. Yeah, so he was, a wealthy guy, right? He has access to the best medical care in the world, the country. He had great insurance. In fact, he was on medications for his blood pressure and his cholesterol, and he was pre-diabetic, so he was on medication for that. He went into the doctor, he got a clean bill of health just 2 weeks prior, and then he found out that, he had great blood work, but he found out that he was sick and he died. That's how he found out, and that's how a lot of people with heart disease find out, is they die.
He was sick with heart disease?
Yep. And he had one of those young plaques that ruptured. So none of the tests or drugs were able to prevent this from happening. So here's an example of a guy dying with great blood work. Bill Clinton actually is an example of a success story. He was a guy that obviously liked his food, and he had progressing coronary artery disease. He had bypass surgery. It didn't work, and then he had angioplasty, and that didn't work. And so he realized he needed to take matters into his own hands, and he read the China study and Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease from Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. And for 2 years now, he's been on a plant-based diet, and you can YouTube him and he'll talk about it. And He's expecting to entirely reverse his disease, and he's expecting that his arteries, which were probably blocked and this big, he's expecting to have them be regular size and completely heal himself. So, smart guy. So, what are we talking about when we talk about a plant-based diet? Well, it's 90% of calories coming from plants, and so 10% coming from animal foods. There's an exception to this. If you have coronary artery disease or diabetes, you do want to go completely vegan because you've got a severe illness at this point. But for the majority of people, you want to think of the 4 major food groups as legumes, which are beans, whole grains, which are going to be your healthy carbs, and fruits and vegetables. You want to eliminate dairy foods, and in class we spend about an hour talking actually about dairy foods and all that. So you want to consume, sort of get the processed foods out of your diet. We're talking about whole natural foods here, and you want to reduce your fat, ratchet it way back. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to eliminate oils from your diet, and that's also one of the best ways to maintain a healthy weight. You want to increase your fiber consumption, which is going to happen when you start following this diet. And the differentiation between food and a treat. And a treat is really like if you're going to a birthday party or a dinner party, or you're going out for a special dinner or something like that. It's situational, so it's not like that's cheating. I think people start blurring the lines between cheating, and especially if it's sort of happening every day. Maybe you made a birthday cake for somebody and you kept the birthday cake and you're gonna like eat it for breakfast every morning, which happens, or pie for every morning. That's not okay, because that becomes sort of a daily thing. But treats are okay on occasion. We also teach you about lifestyle habits, including clean water. We talk about filtering.